Hi everyone, welcome to my next video. I was thinking this morning of my fourth book that I've started to write already, and it's about being an estranged parent of an adult child. And I was trying to come up with a title until I finally realized I already have a title. The title to this video is perfect for my book, and that is The Unspoken Truths of Parental Estrangement. And the more I thought about writing this book, the more I realized how similar I feel as to when I wrote my first memoir, I See the Elephant. And I'm a very passionate person and also a very passionate writer. And when I wrote that first memoir, I just felt compelled to tell my story. I had no idea if it would impact anyone or be of use to anyone, but I just felt the need to express myself and share my experiences and what I went through. And I'm so glad I did, because the reviews have been wonderful. And yes, I could market my book if I really wanted to, but I really don't, other than just mentioning it on here. And as well for the other two. Maybe I'll market them one day, I don't know. But I just rather create videos and just put them on here. So, this book, the more I think about it, the more excited I get about writing it, because there are unspoken truths about being an estranged parent, estranged from an adult child, or an estranged from a relative. And I realized that there is going to be so much more involved in writing this book than just being an estranged parent. And I'm not sure if you hear a little bit of a rustling. Sheppy's out there in the woods doing something. I'm not sure what. Chasing a squirrel or something. He really loves to entertain himself out there. But there's a couple of scenes, and I like to open my books with really strong imagery. And there's two that really stick out to me. And one of them is a foreshadowing scene that I might use. And that is when I was 12 years old. I will never forget this as long as I live. I was 12 years old, sitting in the back of our old Buick on Christmas night with my brothers, my father driving, my mother in the passenger seat, and we were just leaving my grandparents' home for Christmas. It was my mother's parents. And my father had turned to my mother and said, "Gee, Joanne, I'm so sorry about your grandma, that she passed away." Now, what she said was so incredibly nasty, I can't repeat it on here. But I'm going to put it in my book. And I will never forget the shock that ran through my heart from the words that she said, indicating how much she despised her. And I remember looking out the window into the dark night, into all the brightly lit windows of other homes with the Christmas tree lights in the windows, and flashes of people laughing and finishing their meal and opening gifts. And I thought to myself, I wonder what it's like to have a mother that's not so resentful of everybody else. That would be so great. And just the year prior, I had seen my great-grandmother the prior Christmas. And I remember stepping into my grandparents' home, where she sat on the couch, all alone, still dressed in her heavy black coat, with a little paisley dress peeking out beneath the hem. And she wore this huge pair of ugly black shoes that I could tell were very uncomfortable for her, because her ankles were really swollen. But she wasn't complaining. She was just sitting there, taking it all in. And I instantly realized how everyone was ignoring her. And she was just sitting there tolerating it, Well, I had sat on the floor. Of course, I'm going to be attacked by flies again. I had sat on the floor, and she had reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny box and smiled and given it to me and said, "Here, Barbara, this is for you." Well, I opened it, and it was a beautiful tiny golden cross with a tiny diamond chip in the middle on a delicate gold chain. And I had put it around my neck and given her a kiss and thanked her for it. Well, that was the last time I ever saw her. And I never was able to visit her in the nursing home because of my mother's resentment for her. I was never able to get to know her. And because of the silence in our home and my mother's refusal to talk about her at all, just completely shut down any interaction with her that I might have had. Now, in this opening scene, I'm going to include a flash forward 50 years, where I'm now at the night before my daughter's wedding, and I give her that very same golden cross that I had somehow managed to never lose all those years. 50 years, I always managed to keep it with me no matter how many times I moved or how many times I packed up my stuff and went from one apartment to a house to wherever. I always had that cross. Well, as my relationship with her deteriorated, I have no doubt in my mind she most likely tossed that. And I will write about that in my book, how I come to believe that. And that breaks my heart, as she did. Now, the other opening scene I'm thinking about, which is maybe not as drastic, but it has to do with when I was very little, and my uncle used to be a milkman, and he even had his own cows, and he lived directly across the street. But for some reason, we never visited him. I barely knew him. My mother and father never spoke of him, and every morning, my uncle would deliver milk. And for those of you younger, they were delivered in glass bottles in a little metal carrier, 6 bottles to a carrier, and he'd bring one carrier every morning. Now, I'd be sitting at the kitchen table eating my cereal, and I would hear his footsteps coming up the back porch, and my parents were both at the table, my brothers were at the table, and he would leave that metal container on our porch, walk back down the steps, and leave. And not once did my father or mother ever open the door and say good morning or thank you or invite him in. Now, over the years, I heard derogatory mumblings about him, and I gathered that he was not such a nice person from what my parents said. But again, I was prevented from ever knowing him, from ever visiting him, from even crossing the street and sitting on the porch and talking to him. So this same behavior permeated my family for generations, beginning with my great-grandmother. And I'm going to write about how estrangement really poisons other people, and it spread like a spider web throughout my family and caused more harm than I will ever know. Now, this book, a memoir, is not so much about the story itself, but the meaning of the story. And so as I write this, I'm going to write it with the same sense of compassion, understanding, and insight that I had when I wrote I See the Elephant. And the last chapter or two will be about the estrangement that my daughter decided to enforce towards probably the last 10 years of my life. And it started gradually, and I will write about that. And also, I will write about how not only it was incredibly damaging to me, but I believe it's damaging to her as well as my grandchildren, who I will never know. And my main theme is that estrangement by itself does nothing without understanding, insight, and at least the opportunity for open communication. Now, I understand full well that there are very, very, I'm going to use the word toxic, even though I believe it's overused today, toxic parents who um, must be estranged from for either the child's safety, mental health, or both. I completely get that because I had very psychologically damaging parents as well. However, it's interesting to note, and I will include this in my book also, I never really estranged myself from them. I wanted to understand their behavior. I wanted to understand why they treated me so badly and why they refused to have these honest conversations with me, or why they refused to respect my feelings. And to this day, um, I can honestly say that the only thing I ever truly wanted in life was to be able to sit down at that old kitchen table with my mother and have an honest conversation. That's all I ever wanted. For her to listen to me, for her to understand my feelings, and for me to listen to hers. That's all I ever wanted. And I tried until I last saw her at age 92 in the nursing home, when I knew that that was never going to happen. And even then, I held no resentment, but I held an understanding and a pity for a woman that was so caught up in her own issues. Her safety was in silence, regardless of how damaging it was to me. And I believe that she never had the awareness of how destructive she'd been in our family. Now, I am not um, unhappy now as an estranged parent. I was, and I will write about that horrible process and how badly I felt. And I will write about attending my daughter's wedding being completely ignored and being talked to as though I have no interesting things to say or any value whatsoever. And I will write about how it feels to be completely not only misunderstood, but not worthy of being misunderstood. And what's interesting is I was treated by my daughter exactly the way I was treated by my parents. So is this hereditary? I don't know. And another factor is her father is exactly the same way. Is it narcissism? Is there another psychological factor at play? I don't know. But for whatever reason, I am the opposite. I'm very empathetic. I try to be understanding. I'm very sensitive to emotion. And for that reason, I always thought there was something wrong with me. And that was a very difficult way to grow up because asking why was not allowed, trying to understand was not allowed, and expressing my own feelings was not allowed. So to have my daughter dismiss them um, later in my life was a double whammy. But I'm going to write in my book how I not only was devastated, but I moved past it. And I want this book to be inspiring, hopefully very supportive of anyone who is presently suffering by being ignored, belittled, demeaned, and completely erased from their lives of their adult children. Because it doesn't matter who did something right or who did something wrong. Because to me, completely obliterating someone from their lives without explanation, without a conversation, um, is cruel and abusive. Now, I read a couple of comments, not on my channel, but out and about on other channels. And there were actually some younger folks who actually think estranged parents just don't get it, that we're clueless, that we should know that we're at fault, and we should back off and realize that we really messed up and to leave our kids alone. And that is so sad and so twisted. And it shows how this apparently popular new way of estranging parents has really caught on like wildfire. Now, because of my family history, I see this happening all over again. Because what's happened is I do not know my grandchildren, as I did not know my grandfather. And this is sad because my grandfather had a beautiful farm, and I loved animals as I do now. And I always wanted to live with my grandpa and have a horse or just, I don't know, just help him out in the barn. Well, he had an anger issue, and during one visit, he really upset me. And I never saw my grandfather again. Yes, he did something wrong. He made a mistake. But do we banish someone forever just because they made a mistake or they made bad choices? Now, this is a sad truth about my grandpa. When I was 22 years old, or I think actually 20, I had gone out to California and I was working as a payroll clerk. And I received a call from my step grandmother. And she said to me, Barbara, call your grandfather. He's not doing well. He doesn't have much time left. He wants to talk to you. Well, I had harbored so much anger towards him because of what he had done that I refused to speak to him. And he passed away shortly thereafter. Now, it took me years to realize why he had reached out to me. And I believe he had reached out to me because he wanted to give me that farm. And that he'd probably been thinking about me all those years, but had been prevented to interact with me because of my parents. And isn't that sad? That is so horribly sad. And so I'm going to be working on this book with everything I've got, and I'm going to give myself a year and target my self-published date a year from today. And today is, let's see, July 13th, I think, 12th. And I'm going to use the title that I mentioned because I think a lot of people are not realizing that estrangement solves nothing without understanding, insight, and an in-depth conversation for closure between the two parties. And clearly what's happening is my grandchildren most likely know of their mom's feelings towards me. And if it relates to how my family acted, they are being taught that I am not worthy of their time either. And apparently I am faulty, I am clueless, and I am to be kept away forever, obliterated. And so, obviously, I'm making changes in my final plans. And I saw a video about the wild mustangs out west. And somehow I want to leave everything to either an animal sanctuary, animal rescue, or the mustangs out west. It is not to go anywhere else. And so I'm interested in any of your thoughts Um, yes, some of you will probably comment that I don't know what I'm talking about, and if I'm estranged, I must have done something wrong. And have at it, because that can be part of my book too, because I see that a lot, and ignorance is unfortunate. And I'm hoping that by publishing my book, I can help change that ignorance and shed light how estrangement solves nothing. Unless, of course, there are extreme reasons, and I do get that. But for the most part, I don't believe most of these reasons are extreme. I believe that adult children are becoming more um, self-deserving, and if someone is not beneficial for them, then they are to be tossed and kicked to the curb. And so there you go. We have a throwaway society, not only in material goods, but with people. And I even see it with the elderly. Um, the elderly are being seen as not worthy anymore, because we're not up to date with technology. And we have quote unquote old fashioned values. And that, again, is so very sad. Um, but that may generate another book. And so, thank you so much, everyone. I love this channel. My goal is to be a light in the darkness, just like the book I just wrote, There Is a Something. And none of my books are written to make money. If I make a little bit, that's fine. And I realized when I wrote that book, There Is a Something, many people wouldn't get it or even believe me, and that's okay too, because that is all true. And who knows, 100 years from now, it might become popular. I won't know. But with the evolution of science, all of those experiences might have finally an explanation. But I like that it's out there. I like that my book is out to the world. And this one about estrangement will be too. So again, I tried to keep this short. I'm sorry if I'm rambling. Please feel free to comment, ask me questions, and if you'd like me to talk more about this topic, I'd be happy to. Um, I'm not writing it in a blame or right versus wrong, but again, in a more supportive, inspiring, and reflective tone, as I wrote I See the Elephant. So thanks again. I hope you're all having a great day. Take care, everyone.